Welcome to Sunflower Movement. I'm your host, Ashley Buckner. Quick disclaimer before we get started. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. This platform is not a form of psychotherapy, counseling, or healthcare of any kind. Sunflowers bloom in the most unexpected places, always adjusting to stay connected to the sun. I see these sunflower movements as the moments, people, and places where we feel seen, heard, and believed, where healing takes root and transformation begins. If you're seeking that kind of space, you're in the right place. I'm all about being low maintenance to be a high maintenance girly, and my heatless curler from Cozy Confidence makes it so easy. I've tried satin curlers before, but they always made my curls too tight. I love the texture of this one. It gives my hair extra body without feeling overdone. I just sleep in it overnight, brush it out in the morning, add some dry shampoo at the roots if needed, and a little oil on the ends for shine. It makes my morning routine so much easier. If you want to simplify your getting ready routine, Cozy Confidence has you covered. Use my code AshleyB at cozyconfidence.com for 10% off anytime. Your hair will thank you. If you've ever dealt with sore muscles, tension, or just need a moment to reset, you need to try Pranamat. I won't lie, it's a little spendy, but I use mine every single day and it's 100% worth it. Whether I'm winding down, releasing tension, or even working on muscle tone, it makes a huge difference. I lay on it in so many different positions and every time I feel the impact. If you've been thinking about it, now's the time to try it. Use my code AshleyB for 10% off at pranamat.com. Your body will thank you. I've been using this supplement for the past year and I'm not stopping anytime soon. Let's talk about Armra colostrum. I love it for the immune-boosting benefits, workout recovery, and even the strength it's given to my hair. It's become a staple in my routine, and I can genuinely feel the difference. If you're looking for an easy way to support your body from the inside out, this is it. Head to tryarmra.com/AshleyBuckner and use code AshleyBuckner for 15% off. Give it a try. You'll see why I'm hooked. Hi, everyone. Before we jump in today, I just want to take a moment to give you a little disclaimer. When I recorded this week's episode, it was right after my Brainspotting training weekend, and I love that because you're getting a lot of rich, in-the-moment insights, but I also realized that I don't know if I fully defined what Brainspotting is. I was just so excited about everything I was learning, and I wanted to share it with you, and I also want to make sure that I'm clear on the definition of Brainspotting, so I'm going to take a moment to do that now. Brainspotting is a therapeutic approach that allows people to access trauma and emotional distress stored in the deeper parts of the brain that are beyond conscious awareness. It's based on the idea that where you look affects how you feel, and by identifying specific brain spots, we can tap into stored emotions and facilitate healing. This method goes beyond talk therapy, directly accessing the brain's deeper processing systems to help resolve unresolved experiences. Hopefully that helps as you listen to this episode. It's more of really a deep dive into my own personal experience from the training and just Brainspotting in general. I do answer some questions. Thank you for listening and tuning in, and let's get right into it. Hi, welcome back, everyone. You get just me tonight, your host, Ashley Buckner. I am actually recording from Dublin, California. I just finished a Brainspotting training that I dove into all weekend, and I'm really excited to actually get on here today to talk about Brainspotting. I'll talk a little bit about the training, but I'm just going to talk about Brainspotting in a more general sense. My second episode on Sunflower Movement talked about Brainspotting, but I actually feel like it's important to expand and talk more about. I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly growing and evolving as a practitioner. I got some submissions from the audience that I wanted to answer and dive into and share. So that's what we're going to focus on for today's episode. Thank you for listening. Like I said, I'm recording. It's a Sunday night. I just did a 3-day intensive training. So what that looked like is training from 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So you're catching me at the end of this, and I thought about waiting till in the morning to record, but I don't know, it feels really resonant to share with you all tonight and to talk just a little bit more about why I'm so incredibly passionate about Brainspotting, and it's transformed my life on a personal level, a very personal level, and also on a professional level in the way that I show up for my clients, the way that I approach my cases, the way I talk about religious trauma. I mean, the reason why I can speak so clearly about what religious trauma looks like is because of brain spotting. I essentially watch people relive their trauma and release their trauma from their nervous system. And when you do that, you get very well versed in what the neurophysiology looks like in regards to trauma and religious trauma. So anyways, I'm going to just start with the brain spotting training and what that entails and why I think brain spotting is very different than a lot of other trainings that mental health professionals attend. So I have been a therapist since 2012, since I graduated graduate school in 2012, and obviously had attended many different trainings throughout my journey as a therapist. And it's not, I guess, it makes sense that before I did brain spotting training, I was kind of burnt out in the field of therapy. I just didn't know if I was going to continue to do what I was doing. I didn't feel like I was being effective. I needed a different treatment. And then I went to my first brain spotting training. And when you do a brain spotting training as a therapist, you are not just going to learn. You're going to learn, obviously, and you learn about all types of, there's so many different phases in brain spotting, and you learn about how to set up brain spotting, how to do brain spotting with clients. But what makes the training so effective, in my opinion, is that you practice on each other. So you practice with individuals in the training. And then the trainer also demos with people who volunteer in the training. So essentially you get to watch a brain spotting master, someone who's been doing brain spotting for years and years and years, who can train you on brain spotting. You get to watch them demo with another person in the training. And that knowledge and that experience of witnessing that is so rich. Like I can't even begin to tell you. I just watched 3 different people do it. And the trainers have done just thousands and thousands and thousands of brain spotting sessions. So they're just masterful at holding space for the human condition. And to be able to witness that is truly sacred. It is one of the most beautiful things I have ever witnessed in my entire life. And it is why I am such a believer in the field of brain spotting and just the power of our own neurophysiology, the power of our body and brain to take care of us, given the proper tools and attunement and space and environment. It truly is beautiful to witness that level of healing. And I, because of brain spotting, I have had the privilege to witness that so many times. And that is genuinely so profound. So essentially you come to brain spotting training, you learn, you then break out and practice, or you learn, you watch a demonstration, and then you break out in practicums and brain spot each other and practice the skills you learned from the demo. And it's just it's a powerful learning experience. I'm one of those people that I learn best when I watch someone do it and then I go practice it, right? Like that's just how I learn. And so when I did my very first training in brain spotting in 22, and that's what we did, and that's what happened, I was able to go the following week and bring it to my clients. And there's not very many trainings out there that you can go learn and then do the next week with your clients. And brain spotting is one of those things because it is actually, there's a lot of depth to it, but it's also very simple and doable, and it's easy to pivot and shift. And there's not a lot of rules, and it's not very rigid like a lot of the other treatments, which is why I love it, which is why I felt really capable to learn this and bring it back to my clients when I did in 22. And so since then, my brain spotting journey has been never ending. And I've had the incredible opportunity to be a demo a couple times in my trainings. And I didn't do that this weekend, but I got to have, I was at this brain spotting training here in Dublin, California, and with brain spotters from all over. It was a developmental trauma training where we kind of get into like the developmental trauma that happens, 0 to 18 years old throughout our lifetime. And I'm working with, my partner has done a lot of brain spotting training. So I feel very safe with her to really go into my own process. So essentially I get to have this incredible experience when I'm here in this training. And now I get to take that experience and bring it to my clients. And there's not a lot of other things out there that mimic this. And it's why brain spotting, in my opinion, is genuinely just one of the best things I've ever encountered in my life. So I'm just going to tell you quickly all the trainings I've done to paint a little bit of a picture. So I've done brain spotting phase 1, which is obviously the very first phase you have to do. And again, after that first training, you can go and bring that back to your clients. So I did that in March of 22. So right around 3 years ago, which is really exciting, March of 22. And then in September of 22, I did phase 2. So you have to do phase 1 and phase 2 in order to get your brain spotting certification, plus, 6 consultation sessions, plus 100 brain spotting sessions, 50 to 100 brain spotting sessions that you track and mark. And so I did that, and I did my 6 consultation sessions, and I had my 50 hours pretty quick, but I just needed more time with my consultant to feel like I was ready to be certified. And so I actually didn't get my brain spotting certification until September of 2024, a year later. And September of 2023. It's like I'm a little bit of a mush tonight. But yes, brain spotting certification in September of 2023. And right now, I'm working towards becoming a brain spotting consultant myself. That's kind of the journey I'm on. The only thing that I'm doing right now is just I have my certification. I'm receiving my own consultation sessions, but I eventually want to be able to be a consultant. And that is, I don't know how long that journey will take me, right? But that is just something I'm really passionate about, super interested in. The power of brain spotting that's my true passion. I often say that's my bread and butter. I specialize in religious trauma, but I only specialize in religious trauma because of brain spotting. I'm a brain spotting therapist first, and I'll kind of dive into a little bit more about what that means. So anyways, phase 1, phase 2, I'm brain spotting certified. I've done phase 4, which is an advanced training with David Grand, who is the founder of Brain Spotting. And I've also done what's called the high acuity training, which is for clients who are just experiencing significant amounts of distress and aren't getting any relief. And also doing nervous system work is super distressing. So high acuity clients, or, the high acuity training really serves clients who need more support to just get to a place of feeling grounded so they can actually do some brain spotting. And then most recently, my developmental trauma training that I just did this weekend. And there's several phases to that. So I'm actually planning to come back in September to do another developmental trauma, like the 2.0 version of this, because the knowledge was so incredibly rich. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the developmental trauma training and what makes that a little bit more unique than just traditional brain spotting. So traditional brain spotting it's so hard to say like traditional brain spotting because there's lots of avenues, but most of the time I have a client come in and, what do you want to work on? I'm feeling really anxious in social situations. Okay, let's work on the social anxiety. So we'll set up an eye position that's correlated with the social anxiety. Where do you feel the social anxiety in your body? I feel it in my chest. I just get so anxious in social situations. So, okay, just notice that in your chest. I'll get out my pointer. Sometimes I'll use a gaze spot. So just the client will naturally look and find a fixed eye position. And so we'll just brain spot off that, or I'll help them find a position. And I got a few questions on this, so I'm just going to answer it right now. Like, what is the difference between EMDR and brain spotting? EMDR is done in movement. So you're moving back and forth, or you have bilateral stimulation back and forth. Brain spotting is done in stillness. So you think about it like EMDR, you're moving, you're constantly going back and forth, and you're hitting some of the spot of where the trauma is or the activation is, but you don't stay there. You keep going. And so sometimes EMDR can be a little bit like it's almost, you don't stay in the process as much from what I've heard. I'm not an EMDR therapist, so I won't speak to that. Whereas brain spotting, I'm going to find a fixed eye position. I'm going to hold you there. And that stillness is going to send you in to a different part of your brain, right? We're using the eyes because your eyes are just a direct connection to the limbic part of your brain, right? That part of your brain that's right up above your brain stem. And when I'm talking to you right now, and as you're listening right now, you're in your prefrontal cortex, and we can't access trauma in your prefrontal cortex. So in stillness, through the body, we get into that part of your brain where your trauma is stored. And that's how it is different than EMDR. You have to sit in stillness and be with yourself and be with your neurophysiology, and processing ensues. So, right, well, like I'm going to start with the social anxiety, and we're going to go in and I'm going to say, okay, just notice that social anxiety in your chest. Just be really curious about it, really open about it. Just notice it, see where it goes. When clients tune into that, they curiously explore that. And oftentimes it doesn't stay at the social anxiety. It's like kind of a spider web of different things that have happened in their life that have created this social anxiety, because oftentimes social anxiety is just an adaptation of the nervous system. It's just something that the nervous system has produced to cope with distress or, fears, or what you name it. It's so hard to say, right? So different for each individual person. And brain spotting just allows us to get to the core of that. So why did I do the developmental trauma training, and what does that mean, and how is that different from what I just described to you? So people who have developmental trauma, and again, developmental trauma is anything that happens during the developmental lifetime. I mean, they say 0 to 18, obviously when you're younger, when, that 0 to 5 window, when our brains are extremely vulnerable, but right, anything, 0 to 18 years old, any distressing experience we have. And oftentimes it's related to our attachment figures. So it's not so much the traumatic event that happens, but then how do our caregivers respond to that traumatic event that creates the developmental trauma, right? So I've been really curious about this because I specialize in religious trauma, and most everyone who has, I'm not saying everyone, so let me say that. I would say most often people who have religious trauma have it because they were born into the religion. I mean, it's developmentally hardwired into their being. I know this is true for me. I know this is true for a lot of my clients who grew up in a high control religion. And so I'm like, how do I get more to the root of this? How am I going to help my religious trauma clients really move through this activation and the distress and release it from their body? And so I just, I really wanted to enhance my skill set in that. And the whole concept of this digging roots training that I went to is that a lot of times, and this is for myself personally, and I'm going to share kind of a lot about my own personal brain spotting journey, a little bit on this episode, but moving forward, one of my goals is to hop on here and tell you about my brain spotting sessions, because I feel comfortable and to do that with you. Obviously can't talk about my clients, brain spotting sessions for confidentiality reasons, but I can share my personal experiences. So that's, kind of a big goal for Sunflower Movement, and to help you all better understand brain spotting is like, what does it look like for me, and what have been my experiences, because they are, they're life changing. So I will get to that. So what I'm saying is, so like this digging roots concept is, you like envision a tree, right? And you have all your leaves, and then you go into the root of, you go into the branches, and then like the trunk, I couldn't think of the word trunk, the trunk of the tree. And then underneath the trunk is all the roots, right? And I know for me personally, when I started brain spotting, I'm just brain spotting all the little leaf things, like all the little anxieties and stresses that I feel in my life, And I've done a brain spotting since 2022. I was doing brain spotting before I got trained. And I saw immense relief. I'm going to tell you that, it really helped regulate my nervous system. But there has been some deep shit in my nervous system that I have not been able to get out. And yes, I will admit, part of me going to these trainings is for myself personally. And that's why I love brain spotting. I did the pre-course work for this training, and Steve Sawyer, who's a trainer, he said on there, he's like, you're coming to this training to work on yourself. And I love that. I embody that. I'm not going to ask my clients to go anywhere that I'm not willing to go myself. And I will get in that client chair and I will do the work. I'm so proud of my ability to do that, right? So I was like, I'm going to go learn for my clients, but I'm coming to learn for myself. Like I have some deep shame in my system that I can't get the fuck out no matter how many brain spotting sessions I do, So the whole idea is that, you learn techniques in this training to get out of the leaves, out of the branches, out of the trunk, all the way down to the roots, like the deep roots in your nervous system, and to help you access some of that shit. And so I had to do pre-course work before this training. So you did like an 8-hour Zoom recording, and then you had like 8 homework assignments. And I'm telling you guys, those homework assignments rocked me. And I have done a lot of inner work, but it's dredging up all of these things from my childhood that I haven't reflected on in years. Like past traumas, things with my parents, things with my, like things that have happened to me, and to have to really sit with that and reflect on that was a lot. It shook me up. And also when I say that, I'm not afraid of that, because that dysregulation, that distress, that's just a window. It's just saying, okay, here you go. Here's some more work for you to do, Ash. This is your window that you're going to dive into. Like that's your journey. That's what you're going to explore. And I think that's my favorite part about brain spotting, is it's given me a lot of hope when I do feel distressed, when I do feel dysregulated. I'm like, okay, I'm going to see my therapist in a few weeks. I'm going to table this. I'm going to dive back into this with her when it's in a safe place and I have the capacity to do it. Right. So that was my motivation in coming to this training, is one, to learn a little bit more about my own root system, but how do I help my clients get there? So we're not just working on the leaves. And I'm really excited to bring this into my practice and to take my clients on a deeper journey. And it's going to be hard. And also there's things that we've struggled with. And I think this is, really important to point out. There's things that we've struggled with our entire lives that we just can't seem to shake. And I'm going to tell you that brain spotting is the gift. It's the thing that gets in there and moves it. And it doesn't always happen in one session, but it can. And I think that's what's profound with this technique. And it also kind of inspired me too. I obviously I work with individual clients, and my caseload is currently full, but there's this whole realm of brain spotting where you do like a brain spotting intensive, where you have someone come see you one time and you do like a 4-hour thing with them to get into the system, get into those roots. There's lots of different activities to pull and dredge all of this stuff out of the nervous system and get it to move. And I've reflected a lot about that this weekend, to be able to offer some intensive brain spotting services, so people could come, and even if they don't live in Southern Utah, they could come do some sessions with me in person. And I do want to say that brain spotting can and is done over Zoom. I see lots of clients over Zoom. I personally see my own brain spotting therapist over Zoom, and I've done incredible work with her. And also there's just this gift about being in person with someone and the felt sense of their presence. And I'm going to say this, like when I'm brain spotting a client, I'm not talking a lot, but there's this like attuned presence that I give to my clients, that I hold space. I'm holding the space so they can go into their nervous system and do this really deep, hard work, knowing that I got them. And that's really hard for me to explain. It's almost this felt thing you have to experience as a client doing brain spotting. I'm going to just tell you a little bit about like what I walked into this training with on a personal level. So how to do like a lot of developmental trauma reflection, like what are the traumas that happen in my life? Like, let's think about key events that stood out. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a genogram. A genogram is when we draw, in the therapy world, you draw your family out on a piece of paper and you go back generations and you write, this person, like this was the mental health issues for my grandparents, just you kind of like all those patterns. And I've done genograms since I went to grad school. I was a family therapist. We always did genograms. When I was working with adolescents, I would do genograms all the time to help them understand patterns of addiction and depression and family abuse, right? Just kind of helping people understand generational trauma. I hadn't done a genogram in years. I hadn't done a genogram since I got married and had kids. And one of our homework assignments was we had to do what's called an attachment genogram. And basically what that meant is I had to go look at both sides of my family, so my mom's side and my dad's side, and then myself and my siblings, and I had to identify all of our attachment styles. So if you don't know what attachment styles are, I'm not going to go into them right now, but you can go do your own research. You have anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, anxious, avoidant attachment. So reactive attachment, right? So those are different attachment styles. If you're curious what those are, go do your research on them. But essentially it's like how we attach to our caregivers. And did we have a secure attachment? Do we have an insecure attachment? And obviously, like, I can't speak to for sure what everyone in my families is, but I can speculate based on my knowledge, my insight. And that was pretty rough to put on paper, but also really powerful. So I'm writing everyone's attachment style, and I'm like, no one in my lineage has a secure attachment. And this doesn't make him like I'm not even saying bad things about my parents. My parents didn't have secure attachments with their parents. Like, this is just like what trauma looks like and how it gets passed down in families. And so, like, of course that impacted the way my parents could show up for me as a child, but to just put it on paper and to see that no one had a secure attachment, it just kind of was like, okay, Ash, yeah, there's some things there. There's some things from childhood that are still stuck in your system. And I love this. I love this about Steve Sawyer. He's one of my favorite people I've trained with just because of the way he talks about brain spotting. But he says where there's where there's trauma, like, resilience is close by. Like, we've gone through traumatic things in our life, but we're also we're resilient humans, right? Like, resiliency lives in our nervous system. And so I'm like mapping this out on my genogram. No one has a secure attachment. And then I get to my kids and I'm like, I know my kids have a secure attachment. Like, I know that. I'm not a perfect mom. I mess up a lot, but I know that my kids are secure. I know that I show up for them when they're dysregulated. And again, I'm not perfect. I'm not always there when they're dysregulated. That's not what this is about. But I'm there. I am there. And it shows in the way my kids show up in the world. I can tell they have secure attachment. And that was, it's powerful to talk about now, to know that I have broken that cycle of insecure attachment, right? So yes, I personally have some trauma. I have some developmental trauma. I have some attachment trauma. I have some heavy things that I have to work through. But yeah, look what I have done with my kids. And that's the resilience piece, right? That's the really special piece of doing this work, is that we break cycles of trauma. And anyway, so that's kind of the stuff I walked into this training with. And I remember as a little, one of my biggest traumas, and again, I use the word trauma because there's really just not a better word, and I'm not here to compare traumas. We all have trauma in our life. We've all experienced distress, and that looks different for every person. So just know that as I talk about this. One of the things, like some of my biggest traumas as a little girl was I was very scared. I was very scared about everything. I was scared of dying. I was scared a stranger was going to take me. I was scared to walk to the bus. I was scared to go to sleep at night, right? I had a lot of really big fears, and I felt alone in them. And I know my mom, if you're listening, I love you. I just love you. And I want you to know that I love you and that I'm doing this inner work for me. But I'm also doing it for you and for everyone that came before you and before me, because it's real. And I just want you to know that, Mom, because I know you're going to listen to this episode. My mom listens to every episode. and so as I talk about this aloneness, Mom, I was able to really work through it this weekend. Like, I was really able to get into like this felt sense of aloneness in my body, you guys. Like, this is how wild brain spotting is. So you're working with the neurophysiology. You want to get into the neurophysiology. And what that means is what happens in your body when you feel certain things. Like it because that's what puts you back into the trauma, right? So a lot of times when I'm brain spotting clients, they're reliving the trauma. So essentially, like, I'm going to relive my trauma of aloneness. And when we go through traumatic things, distressing things, we constrict. And when I say constrict, like, everything pulls in, our nervous system's bracing for distress, right? Even if it's like me feeling alone and scared at night in my bed. I mean, I was a little kid though. Little kids don't have the ability to regulate their nervous systems. They just don't. They need an adult. They need a regulated adult to help them regulate. And most adults, I mean, they're just not regulated, right? Because we don't live in a regulated world. So it's super complex. Anyways, processing this aloneness, and I did it today, so I'm going to speak on it. So I worked the days leading up to it, kind of getting in contact with some of the felt sensations in my nervous system around just some of this childhood stuff. And so by today, when we got to the processing this morning, on a personal level, I was like, okay, like, I know what I need to go into. I know it's like this, like, feeling scared, feeling alone as a little girl. That's what I need to go into. And I have done a lot of processing work prior, right? With my therapist. But like I said, like, I think a lot of times it was leaves and I wasn't getting to the root. So we really get it. We got into like this capsule of trauma, this aloneness trauma, this really scared, fearful little girl trauma. And what happened is I constricted today. So like, I literally compressed in, and I was shaking. I was like, I can't move. Like, I was shaking. Like, I was just so constricted in. And my like, the person that was brain spotting me, she's a brain spotting therapist, but like, set up an eye position with that, like, that highest felt sense of that constriction. And I like opened my eyes, held my eyes on the eye position, and like, I had this huge release. So for me, and this is, I never had this happen in person before. It's always happened virtual with my therapist, and never this deep and never this quick. So like, I'll constrict and then I'll burp, right? I'll burp through like my whole brain spotting sessions because my nervous system, my like, all of that constriction is releasing. So I've always had stomach aches. I've had stomach aches since I was a little tiny girl. And I will tell you that those have significantly decreased since I started brain spotting, right? So I started doing brain spotting therapy in 2022, and my stomach aches have significantly decreased. But I have to tell you, last night I had a terrible stomach ache, but we had done some of this pre-work to like get into this part of my nervous system where the stomach aches started from, because they started when I was a little girl. So I got a really bad stomach ache last night. And so I was not surprised today when we went in. I went right into that constriction. And then I came out of it and I started burping. Like, I was just like burping, which is kind of hard and very vulnerable to do when someone's holding space for you, to just let yourself burp. But I trust this process so much, you guys. Like, I believe so much in my neurophysiology and my nervous system to take care of me that I can just lean into the burping. So I'm just burping, letting it out. And I thought I was done. I was like, oh, hey, Kay, that was a quick one. I got that shit out. And the therapist brain spotting is like, just keep noticing. Just notice that release. And it's just like that attuned presence of the therapist, like, holding space. And then I just dropped right back in to, I didn't constrict again. I just dropped back into like, just little girl me and everything that she felt and navigated. And you guys, that's heavy shit to feel. It's really heavy. I'm not going to tell you it's not heavy. I was crying. At one point I was like, can we lay on the floor? Like, I need to get down on the floor and process. And then like, I got back up in the chair and burped some more, and just was like this huge release of shit that had been stuck in my nervous system. And I don't know how else to explain it, because there's not always words, but I'm like, even as I'm talking to you right now, I'm just feeling like the constriction still leaving. Like, I've been kind of burping on and off all day, just like letting that constriction leave my body. And I know that burping is a somatic release because I've worked with my other therapist on it. And so it's like every time I burp, I'm like, oh yeah, just like letting that trauma go. But again, we're not socialized to do that. And I had been told, like, I know you don't really have a stomach ache. Like, so it's just like, I just kept constricting. Like I wasn't supposed to be scared. I wasn't supposed to have a stomach ache. Like, all of that got stuck in my body and it needs to get out. And I don't know, I'll have to keep you guys posted on how this integrates, right? So I did that huge, heavy work today. And that's what's really crazy about Brainspotting is you continue to integrate for like 48 hours after. So I'm going to still process. I mean, especially because I did like a ton of Brainspotting work this weekend, I'm going to still process probably for the next like week or so. I'm just going to keep integrating pieces. So when I say that, I'm just going to stay open and curious. I'm just going to notice what shifts. Do I get a stomach ache? Do I not get a stomach ache? Like what happens throughout the rest of my process? And, and also how do I feel like with my aloneness and fear and really what is underneath all of that, it's actually a lot of shame. I feel a lot of shame and a lot of self-hatred. Like, and especially when it comes to being a mom, I just don't feel like I'm good enough, even though like I just told you guys a few minutes ago that I know my kids are securely attached, but I don't feel that. I feel it a little more tonight. I'm going to tell you that I feel it a little more tonight. I feel proud of my parenting. But prior to this weekend, I still just couldn't like fully get through that shame. Like I still feel ashamed of myself. And so, it's a work in progress, but I'm really hoping to bring this back and really integrate it and hold space for it. So that's kind of what this weekend looked like for me. And obviously there was so much other learning that happened and learning about all the skills and the things to dig into the roots. Right. But that was what one of my processes. And so now I'm really excited to bring it back. I'm excited to work with clients. And when they say, and I've been doing this a little bit, right? So when someone says to me, I had a client just the other day, like share like that they don't like Sundays. And I was like, I don't think it's just about Sunday. Like what, and like being curious to like, what's underneath that? What's at like, what are more at the roots of like the activation on a Sunday? And what's helpful for me is I understand Mormon culture. I know how Mormon culture works. And I didn't have this experience growing up as a child, but I know a lot of friends that had very restrictive rules on a Sunday. Like they weren't allowed to do certain things. And in working with this client, that's kind of what it came down to. Like their activation on Sunday was associated with just not being able to do things as a child. And that gets encapsulated in our nervous system because as children, we can't process certain things, right? Like little girl me couldn't process my fear of the dark and my fear of strangers by myself. Like I just couldn't. And I didn't even need anyone to make it better. Do you know what I needed? I needed someone to say, it's okay to be scared. I'm right here with you. And that's essentially what you do in Brainspotting. You just let people know you're right there with them. And you don't even have to say it. Like they can just feel you holding space. So yeah, that was a lot. I'm really good at talking. It's probably why I'm a therapist. But I'm actually really excited that I recorded tonight to share that with you. I'm thinking it's probably like I've shared tidbits here and there about my Brainspotting processes. Maybe, I don't know, on this podcast, but I think this is definitely the deepest I've gone. And it's really that it's funny because even before Sunflower Movement was born, I kind of had thought like, I want to start recording. I was like, I want to start a podcast where I just talk about my Brainspotting experiences because they're so incredibly profound. Like, I mean, they're so transformative. Like have such a big physical release in my body and to have someone like to get on the floor and have someone get on the floor with me and just be there with me to then get back up in the chair to like continue to hold space for me. There's nothing quite like it in the world that I've experienced. So it's very healing and it's just based on an attuned presence. And I know people are listening and they're like, what the fuck? What do you mean you got on the floor? And I get that. And I've just really learned the last 3 years to listen and trust my body and let it take care of me. And I'm going to tell you that I feel very regulated in my nervous system. And regulated doesn't mean I don't feel distressed. And that doesn't mean I don't feel dysregulated. But when I feel dysregulated, I just know that that's information. And the whole purpose of brain spotting is to allow my clients to feel more regulated around the dysregulation, and to help myself and to help my kids. And I'll tell you, night and day difference for how I help my kids navigate dysregulation. As my nervous system has become more regulated and more anchored, I've been able to support them. And in the whole part of this too is supporting my kids and helping my kids get a secure attachment was actually very activating and distressing for little girl me, because she didn't have that. And she wants it. She wants it so much. She's been like screaming in my body. That's why she's like, it's like the feeling of like, I'm bad. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm not worthy. It's like her. That's how she was feeling, because she didn't get that, And so for me to journey in and to do this work, I get to say like, I got you, and you're here with me, and we're going to do it together. And that might sound woo-woo and that might sound crazy, but it was based on my own neurophysiology, my own body, my own nervous system taking me there. And that is the power of brain spotting. Okay, I'll be back with more on myself and more stories later. I'm going to get to some questions. I kind of already answered one about just like, what are the differences between EMDR and brain spotting? Okay. I'm just going to share something too. I got a couple shares. Having tried both traditional talk therapy and brain spotting, I know brain spotting gets to the root of my activation so much quicker and more effectively. Talk therapy can be great, but I always feel better in my body and my nervous system after a big release during brain spotting. It's also incredibly empowering because it's my own body and mind healing itself for the most part. The nervous system knows what it needs, and brain spotting, is just the vehicle to get it there. Oh, I love that last sentence. The nervous system knows what it needs, and brain spotting is just the vehicle to get it there. It absolutely is. And that's what I say to my clients all the time is like, your nervous system has everything inside of itself to heal. And I am just holding the space. In the brain spotting, like in the world of brain spotting, I'm holding the frame for your nervous system to get there. I'm going to attune to you. I'm going to have a regulated nervous system holding the space so that you can go inside and do the work and release it. And it's true. I mean, talk therapy is great. And don't get me wrong, there is an element of talking that goes into brain spotting, especially after brain spotting, talking about how are we going to take what happened in brain spotting and reintegrating it. Right. But when I'm talking, you're not in your body, and trauma lives in our body. Like, remember, like it lives, and that's why we're working with the brain stem and brain spotting, like that limbic part of the brain. That's where the trauma lives. It doesn't live in the prefrontal cortex. If I have a hard time recognizing emotions in my body, would brain spotting still be effective? My answer is yes. It might take time to get there, and it might not, right? So brain spotting can meet anyone wherever they're at. And my question or response to this person would be like, when they say, I have a hard time recognizing emotions in my body, I would say, just notice that. Notice having a hard time recognizing emotions in your body. Is there a felt sense in your body that comes with that? And that's where we start. You don't have to name it. You don't have to tell me what emotion it is. But do you have a neurophysiological reaction to that? And if the answer is no, that's okay. That's still diagnostic. That's still information. To me, that might say, okay, we need to do some body work. We need to practice helping you get into your body. But you don't have to be like, oh, this is anger in my body in order to do brain spotting. No, it is not that literal. Like, there are a lot of times clients and even myself, I'll have sensations in my body and I can't tell you what they are. I have no idea what emotion it is, but I know it's a real, true experience happening in my nervous system. And there's this line in brain spotting that you don't have to know what it is to know that it is. And I feel that to my core. I don't have to know what something is. Like, I can even say that about today and what I did today. Like, I don't have to know what I did. I don't even know if I actually do to know that it is. Like, I know that what I did was real and true and valid, and I had a huge release and healing happened. And I know that. I can't tell you exactly how it did, but I know that my nervous system took me there. And also, when we're going like very young, when when I'm going back to little girl me, I'm not going to always have those words, right? A lot of our traumas can happen pre-verbally, especially like religious trauma can happen pre-verbally. We're indoctrinated in utero, right? So there's lots of layers to this. That was a very great question though, so thank you for submitting. What is it and how does it work? Is it for deep trauma? Will it bring up past experiences that you have blocked out? I think I've covered what it is and how does it work. And if not, I will link some books. So it is, yes, it is for deep trauma. Absolutely. That's essentially what I've talked about today. It's also for everything. I work with clients on creativity. I work with clients who are experiencing grief and loss. I work with clients who are just trying to do expansive work around feeling more self-worth. You know, Brainspotting works with the nervous system and activation. And I use the word activation and not trigger because activation is just a felt sense in our body. I get activation about excitement and joy, right? That's activation. Anxiety is activation, right? Brainspotting works with anything that you feel activation around. And I mean that, like, so what do you want to work on? I mean, that's what I ask clients. What do you want to work on? I want to work on my relationship with my husband. Okay. What do you notice when you talk about a relationship with your husband? You know, like, so you just go with it. You just dive in and, I noticed that, like, whenever he does this, I just get so annoyed. Just notice, where do you feel that annoyance in your body? And you go from there. Like I said, so like insert anything you want to work on. It's like that same approach, right? In terms of like, what is it? It's a neurophysiological approach to healing. So it's neuroexperiential. So what's happening in your nervous system and me holding space for what's happening in your nervous system. And right, in order for us to release trauma or distress from the body, we have to get into the body. But right, like that goes for anything, like, and not just trauma. Like if you want to get a better, like more creativity, I can give you a bunch of like, okay, like go do this stuff to build your creativity, or we could brain spot the felt sense of creativity in your nervous system. And your nervous system is going to tell you what to do to get to be more creative. And it's not going to always be that literal, you guys. Like it's not always going to be like do X plus Y to be more creative, but you might find that you have these insights that come from within. So Brainspotting is a bottom up approach. It's not top down. Bottom up meaning that it comes from within. You have felt experiences from within your own being for what you need to heal. So for example, when I was processing today and I was like, I want to lay on the floor. I knew my body needed to lay on the floor to get out whatever it needed to. It wasn't the therapist telling me to lay on the floor. The therapist was just holding space, but I'm leading the session as a client. So my clients are leading the session. I'm following their nervous system. And the whole idea is when you go through it, when you go through like the darkness, the hard things, that's like you get to the light. You have to go through the dark to get to the light. Like you have to see it through in order to get to the other side. One doesn't exist without the other. And so by going into the depths of our pain and getting to know our pain and not rejecting our pain or judging our pain, but holding space for it, our pain gets to show us what we need in order to heal. And that's what Brainspotting cultivates. And that's what Brainspotting makes possible. Is it creates the conditions for our nervous system to get in touch with what it needs to heal, you know? And If you want to learn a little bit more too, you can listen to episode 2. I think I dive in, probably provide a better frame of exactly what brain spotting looks like. And I'm getting a little more deep in this one of like some of the felt experiences I've had around it and just in working with clients. But one way I explain it a lot to my clients is we go through a distressing event, and a lot of times that event is so distressing, our nervous system will do something to like shut it down to keep us safe, right? And we can't expel that event from our nervous system, so it gets stuck. And then we go throughout life and that event gets activated and our system's like, oh no, we can't feel that. And it shoves it down. So we never quite complete what's called a full wave of activation, right? So a wave of activation as it goes up, it gets really, really icky and scary, and then it comes down. And when you're doing brain spotting, you start to feel those waves. I mean, I had several today where it's like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. It's so scary. And then it release, right? So brain spotting is going in your field and it's getting that thing that's stuck so it can have its complete, like that complete expression of activation. And so it can release from your nervous system. And we just do that until those waves are non-existent. I'm going to keep brain spotting you until you can't pull anything up in your nervous system. And like I said, sometimes you can do that in like an hour and a half session or an expansive session. Sometimes you can get it all out, right? Or you do it over time, or you do it over several sessions. It just kind of depends on what you're coming in for and what you need. And again, that can be for deep trauma work, or it can be for feeling just dysregulated at your job, and oftentimes I think there's deeper stuff associated with that, but I have lots of, and a good brain spotting clinician is going to have skills to assess that and tune in and especially, right, if they've done a developmental trauma training, are we just brain spotting the leaves of the tree, or are we getting to the root core issues so you can like expel some of the shit from your nervous system so you don't keep repeating the same patterns? Okay, moving on to the next question. Oh, I like this one. Where can I learn more about the science behind it? Reading about it online makes it sound like it's some sort of voodoo thing where you end up telling yourself what trauma you'd like to have. Are there any reliable scientific resources you could point me to? So, there is science behind it. I will link it. I'm going to be really straight up with you. I can't speak to, I'm not going to tell you, I don't know the links to the science because I quite frankly have not read the links to the science because the science isn't something I need to know that this method works. And I also like validate, I think that's a very real thing for a lot of people. I would invite you to be curious about like your need for scientific evidence behind it. I trust the founder of Dr. David Grand, who created Brainspotting, and it is newer. So I'm going to tell you're not going to find a lot of peer-reviewed studies on Brainspotting. It was created in 2012. So it's, I mean, obviously like it's been around for, 15 years, but it's still very new in its origin. So I would invite you to keep that in mind when doing your research. But in the same way, like when I go to the doctor, I trust the education of my doctor, so that's kind of how I feel about brain spotting and the people who have trained me, my elders who have trained me, like reading Dr. David Grant's book and I've attended his trainings, one of his trainings, but I trained with other trainers, Steve Sawyer being one of them, Jeff Ryan, my consultant, and they've done thousands upon thousands of sessions. So I have a lot of trust and respect for them. And then I've experienced brain spotting myself. So that's my evidence, right? It's in you said where you end up telling yourself what trauma you'd like to have. And it's not that at all. It's more like this understanding of, okay, like that's what that is. Oh, this is why I've had stomach aches my entire life. Okay. I've been constricting since I was a little girl. I've been constricting and clenching in. And every time my nervous system got activated, it was just unconsciously doing that. And I had no idea, right? Like our nervous system doesn't know time and space. So it's going to be dysregulated by things we don't even know. And I think to your, in my trainers and me understanding this, like my science for you is the neurophysiology, the neurophysiological response. And that's what guides brain spotting. And that is scientific because the nervous system doesn't lie. It doesn't. And it doesn't matter what you feel. Whatever you feel is real and valid. And and we get caught up in intellectualizing and we want to think our way through things. But there are things that we can't think ourselves through. We have to feel ourselves through. And I think brain spotting is masterful at that, but that is very, like, I think when you are very good at intellectualizing and finding a black and white answer and you want certainty, brain spotting is going to push back on all of that because it's not certain, but nothing is certain. The human experience is not certain. How we've experienced trauma is not certain. So I think brain spotting is going to, it's difficult for some people to take in. And I would just invite you to be open and curious, and maybe find someone to brain spot with. It's like one of those things too, like if you can go do it and get relief, but there's not hundreds of peer-reviewed studies on it, is it still not a like real modality? I think we live in a world where we're so caught up with like peer-reviewed studies and facts and science and evidence. And I am supportive of all of those things. And I also just think that there's a lot of money to be made off the medical model of treatment, mental, physical health, right? Brain spotting is one of those things that, like, essentially, if you can go in there and clear out your nervous system, I'm not going to keep making money off of you, right? And unfortunately, the medical therapy field makes money off of people being sick. And I still do my own brain spotting sessions with a therapist, right? And it depends. It's different for everyone. I oftentimes I'm continuing to brain spot to regulate my nervous system so I can show it for my clients, right? So that I can continue to give my clients that co-regulation their nervous system needs when they're processing, and just to help me be calm, grounded, neutral, resourced, right? So I can't imagine continuing to be a brain spotting therapist without brain spotting, right? But like, I'm going to just tell you that I had really severe postpartum after my second baby, and I went on medication, and I wasn't brain spotting at the time. And I didn't want to be on medication, but I didn't have a choice. I didn't have any other options. Didn't even know what brain spotting was. And I started to brain spot. I've been on I got on meds in like November of 21. I started brain spotting in 22, right at the beginning of 22. And made some good progress. And in August, I was like, it's time to go off your meds, Ash. Cause I didn't want to be dependent on meds. And I'm not saying that meds aren't great and there's a time and place for it, but if I can get my nervous system regulated enough to not need meds, like that's what I want. Right. So guess what? I'm not on meds and I haven't gone back since. And it was a little bit of a transition, but I don't need to go back on meds because I know I'm going to have this distress in my nervous system. I'm going to go see my therapist. We're going to work through it. I don't need to be on medication to stabilize myself anymore. I know how to stabilize myself. And yeah, maybe I'm not going to I can't do it right in that moment to go see my therapist, but I have enough regulation skills to say, oh, I'm feeling like so icky in my chest. Oh, but you know what? My feet feel really great right now. My feet feel fantastic. Oh, but I feel so anxious in my chest. Oh, but I'm going to intentionally focus on my feet. And that's where I'm going to continue to feel and notice, right? So what I'm saying here is I don't have to continue to pay for my antidepressants anymore. And the medical model wants me to pay for my antidepressants, and I would just invite you to notice that, to be curious about that. Are like, there are other things out there that you can do to support your nervous system. Like, I'm so passionate about Brainspotting. I'm like, why isn't this done for everyone who comes home from like going away to war, right? Like, why aren't we giving this to every first responder, to police officers, anyone who's doing really heavy work? And because it's such an accessible thing, and there's nothing that goes into it. Like, there's no drugs that go into it. It's just an attuned presence. Like, I do incredible work with my clients, and it's just me and them in an office, and so yeah, that's my science argument. That was very long-winded. And I would just, read some books, like go to Dr. David Grant, read Dr. David Grant's books. There is some, there's science that is in the end of my trainings that I can pull up and link for you if you are interested to know more. But yeah, like, I would just be curious about your need for science. Okay. One more submission, and then I'm going to wrap this up because you guys have been listening to me talk for almost an hour. Brainspotting is amazing. I've done EMDR for years, and I feel like brainspotting is the first modality that has fully helped me process grief and childhood trauma. I feel that. I've never done EMDR, but I myself did talk therapy for a decade prior to Brainspotting, and talk therapy helped. I mean, guys, it's great to learn coping skills and ways to take care of your body and all of the things, but the real shift for me happened when I got into my own nervous system, when I got into my own body, and I did Brainspotting. And I've had this kind of feedback from so many of my clients, even clients who've done EMDR. And again, remember, EMDR is done in movement. Brainspotting is done in stillness, and having to be still and focus in and really letting yourself relive the trauma. It is as scary as I'm telling you. And it's also as freeing as I'm telling you. For me now, I have more distress fighting when I'm at the bottom of my wave and I'm fighting because I can tell I'm going up. I have more distress. Like, I'm so activated. I'm so on edge. And then I can have my full expression of the wave, and it's like, finally. And then it comes down and I'm good. It's like, I need to stop fighting the before and just let it happen. Like, that emotional release is profound. And I mean, emotional, physical, it's a lot of different things. So that was my Brainspotting deep dive today. I don't know how much of it is just like I'm in like Brainspotting nerd mode. I just learned so much. I just absorbed so much. So it felt good to just talk. And I don't know. You guys will have to let me know if you followed. If I sounded too woo-woo. It sounds a little woo-woo. I mean, I get it. And it's also based on neurophysiology. And I'm like, oh, I forgot this in the science part, but I've like looked at brain scans of clients doing Brainspotting. In my trainings, I see like what happens when they can do a Brainspotting, experience. I have a client who has an Aura ring and sends me their stats all the time about just like what happens in their nervous system and the way their body regulates. And I don't have an Aura band, but just to know that their neurophysiology shows it's working. And that's what I trust. And that's what I believe in. I mean, I trust people's nervous system. I literally know their nervous system has everything in them to take care of ourselves. I mean, that's evolutionary, right? I see this all the time. We are meant to go into fight or flight. Like, that is essential to our survival. If we do not, we will not survive, right? And we become so fearful of that. We may become so fearful of our emotions. We are so scared. And I say this because I was too. I was terrified of feeling anxious and scared and sad and all of it. So we fight them. We fight all of those emotions. And those emotions are just necessary for our survival as human beings. I'm even going to say this about shame. And I think shame is one of the most distressing things we feel. And and that's where so much trauma gets encapsulated. But shame's bubbling up because it's a survival thing. It's trying to help us like be okay, right? Like, oh, I feel so much shame. And I think about when I confessed to my bishop when I was 15 and then I didn't take the sacrament, and I felt so much shame. And that was almost protective because I was like, I'm never doing this again. I'm never confessing again. Right. And again, like shame is that was such a distressing feeling. And I don't want to feel shame. I didn't want to feel shame again. Right. But like it's just a manifestation from my nervous system. And I can't hate shame in order to work through shame. I got to befriend shame. I have to get to know it. I have to go shake hands with shame and be like, okay, here you are. I don't like you, but I'm going to be curious and open to getting to know you. And that's how we move through things. And brain spotting is essentially allows us to make friends with our feelings, our hard feelings. And everything we feel is part of the human experience. And it's not good. It's not bad. It just is. And that is probably the thing I have learned the most from brain spotting. Thank you for being a part of Sunflower Movement today. Just like sunflowers turn toward the light, may you keep leaning into growth, healing, and the spaces where you feel seen. If today's content resonates with you, please share, like, and review. It would mean the world to me.